I hate that I was muted and it's recorded. So now everyone's going to see that. How embarrassing. But we're here now. You can hear me now. It's all fun now. Yeah, here we go. So what I was saying was the style guide feature and topics to address is all we're going to go over today. We're not going to have a weekly poll or tip. So getting back into what I was saying, the style guide feature is mugshot formatting and placement. Mugshots are already formatted in our FCC Universal Library, so make sure you're using that item. But just to go over the formatting of that, it is 0.65 width frame with a 0.5 border. The name line itself is actually Arial bold, and that is 8/12 points with a -15 track. That's to really help us with some of those longer names that I feel like we kind of run into on a regular basis. And knowing that leading, I think, is helpful because sometimes we do run into those last names that are hyphenated. So we do sometimes have to break it over 2 decks when we're using mugs. Obviously, in that name line, that means the last name only. The first name should never appear in a mugshot name. The only time that really arises is when you have a rare situation where you have maybe siblings, where people have, or sometimes a similar last name like Johnson, where you're having to use the first initial of that person. Make sure you're cropping those photos tight. I think the good rule of thumb is to the ears, but really we want to see it nice and tight to the face. I feel like sometimes it gets right on the edge of the ears, but if you cut off the ear, it's okay, because I know some of those are a pretty wide shot. You want to make sure you're nice and tight on the face. Remember, it's only a 1/2 inch size photo in real life. When people are looking at the picture in the paper, it is only a 1/2 inch wide. Mugshots live on the left side of the column when they're placed near the first, or they're placed near the first mention of them within the column, within the story, excuse me. Or they go in the top left of the second column. And I will actually share my screen. And then, of course, the double mugs, they will always live at the top of the second column of your story. Let me preview this. Please. Okay. Couple items to address, but also included from what I just went over with the mugshots. Good example of where they live in the second column. Sorry, my computer froze. There we go. Put it in preview mode so you can actually see what I'm talking about here. So that's where those mugshots are going to live, unless you're running this mug maybe with their first mention, and maybe that appears right away first in the story, and making sure that looks nice on the page. Wanted to present something that came up recently. Here's a screenshot of an example. This story jump is 3 columns over 6. And this is something we want to avoid. I think the reason why they may have done it was they wanted to get the photo in with the story. But I feel like there's other ways we could have gone about that. What we want to address is that we're not running 3/6. We wanted to kind of rein that into using like 1 column as a rule of thumb. So you're running 1/2 or 2/3, 3/4, and so on. So to move that out of the way, this is an obvious good example of 5/6, but I just wanted to show that even a 4/6, that kind of pushes it a little bit, because you want to keep in mind of the readability and how long a person is reading across before they go down. And I think even 4 columns pushes it a little bit. So I think the only time I would even use 4 columns in this situation would be if I was doing a centerpiece and it wasn't even across 6. It was more like over 5.5, because I would give that little bit of white space around the outside. But this is just as an example, but just wanted to go over that with you. So make sure you're using kind of a 1 column as a rule of thumb. So 1/2, 2/3, and so on. Recently, we've had side saddle cut lines being used where they're kind of floating. They're in the middle, they're at the top, they're not quite at the top, they're not quite at the bottom. So I wanted to address that with you guys, that they should be either aligned at the top or the bottom. We don't want them centered. We don't want them floating randomly down here because it doesn't really anchor it to the photo. So you want to make sure you're aligning that text box right to the top of the photo or down here like this example where it's aligned right to the bottom of the photo. And obviously just a reminder that there are side saddle cut lines available to you in the FCC library, and those do not have a text wrap on the inside. So that's why those will align right to the bottom or right to the top for you. Oh, and lastly, in the present, Joe put together the web teasers. As you see in our FCC Universal, we have the video web teaser. Joe went ahead and put that together. So each folder, each publication that has a folder within our library, he went ahead and added these so they're specific to that publication. So you're not having to add or type in that newspaper's website. So Alexandria, for example, when you drag this on the page, it's going to be the exact same format because that is the style we want to be using for our video teasers. But you'll see this one is already set up to say Echo Press. And then this one has X's if you needed to specify the story or add any text to those. So those are available in the libraries for those. I believe that's all I needed my screen share for. So I will stop presenting. Maybe. All right, I see a question popped in. Okay, so it popped in that there was a question, but then I opened the question bar and it's not there. I don't know why that's happening. Oh, sorry, it took a minute to load. Sorry. Aaron asked, the rule back in the day for the forum was always the side saddle should be aligned to the bottom if it was at the top of the page, and aligned to the top if it was at the bottom portion of the page, so you don't trap that white space. Do you still feel that's a good rule to follow? I guess what we decided in our manager meeting was just that it had one or the other. I can see where that would be a good rule of thumb too. Not going to make a decision right off the fly. We can discuss that and I can get back to you. But for now, I think the major thing we wanted to address was just that it's not floating in the middle. Try to rein that in a step, and we'll at least start aligning them to the top or the bottom. And we'll let you guys know about Aaron's question when I send out the email with the video link for the meeting. Last couple things to go over was a reminder about turning in your holiday priorities to me. Need those by 5 o'clock tomorrow, Friday. There was an email sent out with all the details in there. And then also skeletons starting in the next week or two for Rochester and the Pine and Lakes PEJ groups. So that'll be something to add, and Michael will get those posted on our site and added to our FCC libraries. Yes, I will forward that. Lauren asked if she could get that email forwarded to her. Yes, Lauren, I will see that that gets forwarded to you. Joe or Michael, do you guys have anything you want to add? Pretty short and sweet today.
Yeah, Becca, did you raise your hand because you had a question or no?
Yes, I did have a question. Thanks. About the side saddle, when you had that example about the photo in the lower left corner with the side saddle on the right, that was right in the middle of the page. And then there's white space. Should we be moving that? I always was told to get the white space to the outside. So then I always put the cut line on the left side saddle. Is that how we should be doing that? Did that make sense?
I'm really sorry. I don't know if it's my connection, but it's really cutting in and out pretty bad. I think what you asked was if you should be putting that side saddle on the left versus the right because it's in the middle of the page.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I put this together quick. I honestly didn't even think about that, but yeah, I totally agree with that. Where if it's in the middle of the page, especially how I have it here, definitely move that photo in so it's not a random hole in the middle of the page visually. I think that would look a lot nicer.
Okay.
And then of course that would be a right where the
Right, justified. Yeah.
words are hard. Fine. Yeah, the spine would go towards the photo.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Becca.
Yes. Thank you.
I just have one thing to go with the mugshots. Emma said last name only. That's usually the rule that we go by. Sometimes I run into the problem with junior or reverend or pastor or any of that stuff, military titles. For that, I just usually ask the editor what their preferences. I don't think as a collective we've made a call on that yet. So yeah, usually just last names. But if it's junior or anything like that, just run it by the editor and see what they want to do.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Michael. Or Megan said if there are two people with the same last name in the story and Joe first initial. Okay. If anyone has any questions after the fact, of course, please reach out. We'll get a email sent out to the group and I'll forward that email to you also, Lauren. We won't hold you here any longer. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.